They've buried husbands, raised children, survived heartbreak, and rebuilt themselves from nothing, more than once. Nobody asks for their advice. Nobody puts them on magazine covers. But the women who've lived the longest, lost the most, and kept going anyway, they've been trying to tell us something for years. Today, we finally listen. Older women are the most systematically ignored demographic in modern life, invisible in advertising, absent from leadership conversations. The paradox is almost unbearable. The people with the most earned wisdom are the least consulted. Eleanor is 74. She spent 40 years waiting to leave a marriage that was slowly hollowing her out. Then her best friend Carol died at 68. At the funeral, Carol's daughter read from a journal Carol had kept. A whole life, queued up and never executed. Eleanor drove home from that funeral and signed up for a painting class the same evening. She tells this story with urgency. A Cornell University study found that women over 60 identify self-silencing as their greatest life regret, the ones they talked themselves out of. The permission Eleanor was waiting for was never coming. She says, "I spent 40 years making myself smaller so other people would feel comfortable. Not one of those people is lying awake tonight thinking about what they owe me for it." Miriam is 69. She was married for 22 years to a man who never hit her. She repeated that for years as proof that she was fine. What he did was quieter. Consistent humiliation, isolation from friends, the slow erosion of her sense of reality. At 58, she was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. At 61, a second one. Your nervous system is listening. The body does not separate emotional experience from physical health. It records everything. Processing pain is not weakness. Suppression is not strength. It is debt that compounds with interest. Your nervous system is listening to everything you are tolerating. It is keeping a record. One day, it will hand you the bill. The earlier you pay attention, the lower the cost. Ruth is 77. She discovered on the same week she buried her husband that she had no idea what accounts existed. Eleanor drove home from that funeral and signed up for a painting class the same evening. She tells this story with urgency. Ruth now teaches financial literacy. She says, "It is the difference between dignity and dependence in the last chapter of your life." Women in their 60s and 70s who still don't know what accounts are in their names. Women whose entire retirement security is tied to a person who could die, leave, or become incapacitated. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General declared loneliness a public health epidemic. Women over 65 experience the sharpest loneliness spike of any demographic, documented across decades by the Harvard Study of Adult Development. This is the least acknowledged experience in human life. Agnes is 82. She has outlived her husband, her two closest friends, and her sister. She describes a specific kind of loneliness that has no public ritual. The loss of your last peer. When a spouse dies, there are condolence cards and casseroles. When your last close friend dies at 79, most people don't understand why you are still not over it 6 months later. The grief of outliving your entire social world is one of the most isolating truths. Don't wait until 74 to remember. Agnes learned to swim at 78. She joined a water aerobics class. Community does not maintain itself, she says. You have to keep building it. Especially the ages when it feels most embarrassing to try. It changed their physical health as measurably as it changed their emotional life. Forgiveness is a health decision. Johns Hopkins Medicine links chronic unforgiveness to weakened immune response. Holding rage and resentment in the body is not a metaphor. Forgiveness is choosing not to let someone else's worst moment live rent-free in your body for the rest of your life. It is a reclamation. It is the moment you take your own future back from a person who already took enough, received, when the pain finally costs more than the anger. Society gives women one reinvention story, the comeback, the glow-up. Real life demands several. The reinventions after 60 are the most honest. Miriam became a therapist at 63. Ruth published her first book at 71. Agnes learned to swim at 78. You are no longer performing for anyone. But there is a grief inside reinvention that nobody names. Mourning who you used to be, even when who you are becoming is better, is real and necessary. The woman who raised children and built a career deserves to be grieved. You are allowed to miss her while you become someone new. The version of you at 70 is not a diminished version of who you were at 35. She is the accumulated, edited, hard-won result of everything you survived. She deserves to be introduced, not hidden. To women in their 20s and 30s, the choices that feel small right now, financial, relational, physical, compound over decades in both directions. What you build quietly now will either protect you or haunt you. Start earlier than feels necessary. To women in their 40s and 50s, it is not too late to change anything. Your body can still respond. Your finances can still shift. Your relationships can still be renegotiated. But it is also not as early as you think. To women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, your story is not background noise. The clarity you carry, the specific, unsentimental wisdom that comes from having actually lived, is the most valuable thing in any room you enter. The world has spent decades making you feel otherwise. The world was wrong. You are allowed to take up space. You were always allowed. Don't wait until 74 to remember.